Good morning again, and welcome to the SEC Daily here at Southeastern 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by my co-host, Blake Lovell. We will talk about college football playoff chances, bowl predictions, all sorts of stuff, and get into whatever you guys want to get into in the questions and the comments. So be sure to leave those. Always looking for sponsors here. That is how we keep things alive. So contact caroline.smith at southeastern14.com if you're interested. Anyway, we are getting to the midway point of the college season. Like that's when it starts to get interesting because this is when the real games begin. We have gotten through the soft underbelly of the non-conference schedules. We've gotten into conference on conference. We've started to weed out some contenders from some pretenders, but mostly that part is ahead of us in the coming weeks, and I am here for that.
Yep, it should be interesting as always as we dive into all these games for the upcoming week in the SEC. If you guys haven't already checked it out, so you can do that on the channel. We've got all of our preview videos up for all the matchups, so check that out. And yeah, we will be jumping into some bowl projections and playoff odds based on what we're seeing right now here and kind of the Tuesday before we really start to look ahead and kind of preview these games a bit more in depth the next several days here on the Daily Show.
Yeah. Playoff projections, they're getting hard to find. I don't know if you found any recently updated odds. When I was looking last night, I hadn't found much other than what ESPN does at FP Plus, which also I did not realize is also renamed and rebranded under All-State Playoff Predictor. That is one and the same as ESPN's playoff odds. But we have got Blake, I think at the moment.
I mean, I've got the full list of odds if you want them. Like every betting service has odds for playoffs.
Okay, I want to get to those in a minute. I will start with FPI as a jumping off point before we get to some others. FPI right now, 21 or 22 teams, I think, that it lists with at least a 0.1% chance or better to make the college football playoff. Actually, I think that's a little bit low. Anyway, let's just call it low to mid 20s. If you lower that threshold to 1% or better, we are under 20. If you lower that threshold to 9% or better, we are at 11 teams right now. That list would include, in order, Ohio, well, not in order, Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Oregon, Washington, Penn State, Florida State, Southern Cal, and I know I'm missing somebody here. Maybe I'm not. UCLA's in there somewhere. I don't have the right odds for that. But anyway, that's kind of your short list of what FPI thinks. Ole Miss in there at 3%. Louisville also, after a really good weekend, that vaulted its chances a little bit in there too. So we've also got North Carolina in there at 7%. LSU still with about a 1% chance, and then lots of hangers on Maryland, Duke, Utah, Miami, those kind of teams that don't have much of a shot, but FPI says that's you're saying there's a chance. So that's where we are. What have you got at odds makers of interest?
Well, I mean, this is just who is, looking at national championship, which again, you can kind of tie into the teams have the best chance to win the national championship, or the teams have the best chance to make the playoff. And so, yeah, if you go to Vegas Insider, they give you all the odds everywhere. Georgia, specifically at DraftKings, seemingly setting itself apart, whereas like at FanDuel, Michigan's still right there, at least in what I'm seeing in the updated odds. But boy, that can't be right, is it? Georgia DraftKings is, they are significantly ahead of everyone. I don't know if that's just, again, I'm seeing a different number maybe, but that's just what I'm seeing here on the Vegas Insider updated odds. But Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, Ohio State are your top four at the moment. Penn State after that, Oregon, Washington, Oklahoma, Texas, then Alabama. So, again, if you're looking at it from the SEC standpoint with, a couple different teams and their playoff odds and trying to get multiple SEC teams in, like I've said before, Chris, I just think it's going to be a hard thing to do this year, given how things have fallen to this point. Of course, we know all it takes is one loss here or there, and you've got teams that still have to play each other. Specifically, like we said, Oregon and Washington are going to play this week. We know the trio of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Those games will take place. Of course, Oklahoma, Texas. Oklahoma gets the nod in that one. Florida State still trying to, stay on path here because you never know what one loss could do for them, given just maybe where things are conference-wise. So, yeah, it's interesting. LSU, is a little bit way further down there from an odds standpoint, but they're only 3 spots behind Alabama if you're just looking at it in terms of the consensus playoff odds here, which USC and North Carolina sandwiched in the middle. Tennessee has the same odds as LSU at the moment, Ole Miss after that. And so, yeah, I mean, Georgia's performance clearly, if you wanted the best Georgia number in terms of betting, you should have got that before this past week, because that number in terms of winner is definitely getting a significant boost for Georgia after that performance against Kentucky.
I've 38 gotten out of the college football playoff odds business.
Chris, let me tell you how many times I've checked 538 in my
I'm guessing
career.
that would be a 0. Yes, they have not updated anything since January. I liked them because you could click through and find all these scenarios. Because, like when you said LSU, this is what got me to thinking about it. It's like, what if LSU beats Alabama? How does that help playoff odds for LSU? You can build in a lot of those scenarios. That was a great tool, but I guess maybe Nate Silver stopped doing it. I don't know. I always love that one. But Georgia, you mentioned, is kind of interesting because there's been a disconnect for a while between what humans and computers have thought about this team. Georgia this week still, other than SP Plus at 2, FPI, FEI, team rankings all got Georgia at 4. Sagarin's got him at 5. There are 3 teams. Actually, Ohio State and Oklahoma both have playoff odds higher, according to FPI, than the odds makers have. And again, I just keep saying this all year. There is so much parity and so much difference of opinion. It is making for one of the most fascinating seasons that I think I've ever been alive to see. And I think I'm kind of with the odds makers on Georgia, more so than the computers. Part of it, maybe Georgia got it gifted an easy schedule. I think that's fair to say. That's also just kind of part of how it goes. I'm looking down the schedule. Other than that trip to Knoxville on November the 18th, I don't know that I see anybody knocking off Georgia. I mean, the next toughest ones will be Missouri and Ole Miss, probably not in that order. But guess what, Blake? Both those games in Athens. And I don't see them losing in Athens after what Georgia did to Kentucky Saturday night.
No, I mean, we had this exact same conversation multiple times in the offseason. We said, really, if you look at their schedule, the only potential drop-off point is the Tennessee game to me. I mean, that was it. So, I mean, that was, again, the talk of the preseason was Georgia's schedule. And if you're trying to find a loss, good luck, because I didn't see any on the preseason schedule unless it was at Tennessee. So nothing's changed to that point, even though, like I said, Georgia had to come from behind against South Carolina. Same with Auburn, but yeah, I mean, this was just, rinse and repeat. Like, this is the same conversation we had in the summer because nothing's changed. I mean, they should still beat Vanderbilt unmercifully. They should still beat Florida. They should still beat Missouri, even though Missouri's playing better. It's in Athens. They should still beat Ole Miss, even though Ole Miss is playing better. It's in Athens. At Tennessee, that's it. I'd be surprised if Georgia loses another game and it's not at Tennessee. So,
what you have are 2 realistic playoff contenders right now in the SEC. You've got Georgia, you've got Alabama, you've got Ole Miss, Tennessee, LSU with the puncher's chance, Ole Miss with the best chance. Ole Miss, now that's going to be interesting because I think you could potentially see a scenario for Ole Miss that sets up as this is your season right here in Athens game, because I think at Auburn, and Ole Miss has a bye week, but next week at Auburn, very winnable game. Vanderbilt at home, game they'll win. A&M, tough game, but that one's in Oxford. I'd have to give them the edge. They're not losing to Louisiana Monroe. I don't think they're losing at Mississippi State. Ole Miss gets really interesting, Blake, if it can run the table going into that Georgia game. Again, I still think that's a really tough ask in Athens, but they put themselves in position to make that interesting if they run the table between now and then. You're not buying it.
No, I'm sorry. I think Georgia and Alabama are the only ones with a shot right this second.
Yeah.
Even if you're projecting ahead, because again, here's the problem. All right, if you're going to find a second spot for an SEC team in the playoff, tell me who of this group does not make it. Okay, if we're talking non-SEC teams, would you say, Chris? Let's frame it this way: is it fair to say Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State, one of those teams will be in the college football playoff?
Yes, and speaking of
Yes.
Michigan, Michigan's interesting because that's the one that everybody looked at that schedule before the season and said, "Hey, they're gonna cakewalk to the playoffs." Well, suddenly you look at those last 3 weeks at Penn State, at Maryland, Ohio State. That's why you're seeing Michigan drop in the odds.
You're really campaigning for Maryland these days. You tried to convince
No,
me of that
but
last week.
Maryland could beat
I'm
Michigan
just
at
messing with
Maryland.
you. Calm down, Chris. Calm down. I was just messing with you. Maryland looked good for a little bit against Ohio State last week, but Chris got Maryland winning the college football playoff based on our conversations in the past couple weeks.
You're just
It
cranky
seems.
because we're not talking about Dennis Gates.
Well, we've already done that this morning. We recorded 2 35-minute basketball previews, so we've been doing this for a long time already. But okay, going back to it, we know one of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State's going to make the playoff. Agreed?
Yes.
Okay. One of Oregon, Washington, USC is going to make it. Agreed?
Probably.
Again, that's assuming, let's say, one team runs the table. Then I think at that point you can't leave one of those teams that runs the table out.
Oregon, Washington, and who?
Well, USC.
Oh, yeah. I don't know that Southern Cal can defend anybody long enough to make it. That's the problem.
But they're still 6-0 and 4-0 in the league right
yes.
now.
I mean,
So,
look, hey,
yeah.
we just spent time dissecting Ole Miss, Tennessee, and LSU. They've got a better chance than any of those. So, yes.
Yeah. So I think you're definitely going to have a Big Ten. You're definitely going to have a Pac-12 unless you just see these teams, which again is very possible. In terms of these teams still have to play each other. Someone's going to lose. But my guess is the leader of the pack in the Pac-12, I think, is going to be good enough this year for sure to probably be in one of those spots. Now the question becomes, are Texas and Oklahoma, is the Big 12 winner, which we assume it's going to be one of those teams, do one of those teams make the playoff?
Probably.
But again, it's going to probably depend on record, right? So we're playing scenarios here.
Oklahoma's got a really clear path to get to the title game. I mean, the toughest games they've got left, I think, are probably at Kansas, at BYU, maybe at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State has picked it up a little bit lately. But, I mean, I don't think I see Oklahoma losing any of those games. I mean, and then the point is those are the toughest games, in my opinion. They've got UCF and West Virginia, but those are at home. Same with TCU. There's a reason Oklahoma is the top playoff odds team at this point.
Florida State is the kind of outlier here, not because actually they have the third best odds right now, but because they're kind of the lone ACC team I think you look at right now that feels like it has the best shot. I'm not going to say by any means I think Florida State's a definite to make the playoff. If they run the table, yes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they won a 2-point game at Boston College. Of course, they won an overtime at Clemson. They still got to play Duke. They still got Miami in there. They should win these games, but I don't know if I'm completely there just yet to say they're a lock. Whereas
I guess where those games are, they're in Tallahassee, and that's the thing. And I'm seeing this with a lot of these teams. You're going, well, this team could beat them on the right day. Then you look up and like, oh, well, those are home games, so maybe not.
Look, Louisville mentioned in the comments. They're another team.
Yes.
Yes, and that's where the ACC winner, that becomes the discussion. I think, I don't know, you tell me. We know the Big Ten winner's getting into the playoff. The ACC winner, I think if it's Florida State, good chance. I don't, and look, like I said, we're still way early in this thing. You have to project whether teams are going to lose games and all this other stuff. But that's why I'm kind of making my point of, I think this is such a hard path for the SEC to get a second team this year. if you're going to go on the projection or the scenario that Georgia is one of those teams as an unbeaten number one team. Not to say that, an Alabama couldn't get there and LSU maybe in that scenario or something, but I think it's very clear. Georgia, Alabama are the 1-2 right now. Alabama getting there, I think, is Alabama winning out. Honestly, Chris, I think it's kind of a similar scenario, right? To me, it's like if you're going to get two SEC teams in, I think you're going to have Georgia winning out. You're going to have Alabama winning out, and you're going to have Alabama beating Georgia in the SEC championship game. Go figure. I think to get both teams in. So,
well, in that point, the narrative with Georgia for a while has been, okay, if Georgia gets there, then with one loss, or not, if Georgia gets to one loss at the end of the season after the title game, is the body of work strong enough to get it in? And that's where I think we have some fair issues, because right now their best win is Kentucky, that came in Athens. Auburn beat Auburn on the road, nice win. We'll get to the end of the season to see how much that moves the needle. I'm not sure it moves the needle a lot right now, but I mean, Auburn's a top 40 type team. South Carolina, borderline top 40 team. If they stay there, UAB, Ball State do nothing for you. Opportunities for good wins. The Ole Miss win could mean something. Beating Missouri could mean something. Winning in Knoxville would mean a lot. And then it's just, how do you compare to everybody else, and maybe how do you lose to Alabama? Is it a field goal? I think if it's that, then Georgia probably gets in. If it's Alabama boat races them and beats them by 2 or 3 touchdowns, then my guess is not.
Yeah. I mean, let's remember too, there is still, I think, a decent chance that both Michigan and Ohio State get in, because they did last year. Because remember, it's like how that game plays out. But this year's going to be more interesting because that's going to depend on Florida State, Pac-12 playing out. All right, how about this? Let's have fun with this. All right, we're just going to put each other on the spot here. Week 7, going into Week 7 here. Give me your college football playoff. Give me your 4. Week 7.
Oh man.
I mean, you got to put Georgia. That's one.
Yeah, that was going to be my easy one. I think Florida State. I look down that schedule and, okay, home games: Syracuse, Duke, Miami. Probably take care of business in those. At Wake, I don't think Wake is good enough to beat them. Same with Pitt.
Didn't think Boston
At
College
Florida
was
in
either,
the season.
They were close.
What's that?
I said didn't think Boston College was either, but that game was close.
Yeah, but I think that's an aberration. I think Florida State's got too much firepower. And Florida at the end of the season in Gainesville, sure. I mean, Billy Napier, he's got this thing down to where they are playing at a slow tempo. They're limiting the number of plays. If Florida can force a few turnovers, as I pointed out, that's a much different team. Do I trust them to beat Florida State? I still don't. So I think, to me, Florida State is probably your safest bet in terms of naming teams. Then I think, to me, it's easier to name conferences than it is teams.
No, got to pick a team.
Okay. All right, let's do these one by one and let me think through it, because I'm going to need some thought. I'm not just going to give you an answer right now. Okay, Ohio State, games left that are kind of dangerous. Penn State at home. We haven't really talked a lot about Penn State. I'll go into them in a minute. Wisconsin and Rutgers road trips. Those will not be pushovers. Ohio State should win them both. Michigan State, Minnesota, they handle that at home. At Michigan, that could be the winner-take-all game. Michigan, in the meanwhile, as I pointed out, has to go to Maryland and Penn State, which I think they'll take care of Maryland. And my guess is they take care of Penn State, but who knows? So I think win over Ohio State, Michigan, probably. And probably.
I think winner Ohio State, Michigan is in, I think. Like, without question.
And that's at Michigan, so I'll take Michigan there. But you know what? What's interesting is FPI's got Ohio State with the second best odds. Problem for Michigan is that road trip to Penn State. Because computers right now don't have Penn State too far behind Michigan. I'm going to guess that's going to be close to a pick'em game at Penn State.
I was going to say, this is a good point by Andrew in the comments, saying that I think this is a good point about, I do agree. I think there's a decent chance that Penn State could beat one of the two. So that is something to think about. So that could be, and that's where like the Michigan Ohio State game could become interesting. Whereas maybe it's not a lock that the winner gets in. So I don't know. That's a good point by Andrew.
Now, I wonder if you have a situation where, you know, the problem is Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State are all in the Big Ten East. So you could get that whole thing of one team slips in the playoffs by virtue of not being in the title game and picking up a loss there.
Possible.
I'll take Michigan, but I'm not feeling great about it.
All right. Well, for the listeners on the audio side, Blaine's got Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, Washington. I think so far we've gone Georgia, Michigan. I would also have Michigan in mind right now. That's how far we've gotten. Now we've got to come up with the other two teams.
Well, I think the Pac. Well, you know what? Oklahoma, I think, is not going to say an easy pick, but easier than some of the rest of these we're trying to deal with. I think the Pac-12 could just off itself by virtue of not a lot of easy outs there.
Yeah. I think the winner of Oregon, Washington on Saturday gets there. I'm going to go ahead and make that my claim.
Yeah,
right now.
but Washington's got to go to Southern Cal. It's got to go to Oregon State. If Oregon wins that game, it's got to go to Southern Cal. It's got to go to Oregon State. I mean, I just think you could see one of these jumbles where maybe nobody in the Pac-12 ends up. And I think the Pac-12 is probably the best league in the country, top to bottom this year. I know that's blasphemy in our part of the country. But you could see the Pac-12 doing to itself what the SEC has done in so many past years.
Yeah, it's not an easy schedule, like I said, for any of those teams.
I'm telling you,
right.
This is why I think this is an outstanding season. You just look through this, and I cannot give you clear answers because I cannot tell you who's going to win these. It feels to me like it is Georgia, Florida State, Oklahoma. And then pick your team of whoever sorts through the trash at that point to get out. You know, we haven't talked about Texas yet. Texas gets a rematch with Oklahoma. Then what does that do? Yeah,
it's fair. I don't know. I like Georgia, Michigan as a combo there. I think beyond that, I'm with you. I'm not 100%. I think Florida State has the schedule to get there, but I don't know. I wonder just based on what some other teams could do, specifically the Pac-12 and perhaps the other Big Ten team that's in the conversation. So I don't know. I think the winner of Oregon, Washington, to me, I'm going to go ahead and just predict that team gets in. Which, by the way, I think Oregon's got a good chance to win that game, but it's going to be tough because it's on the road, and Washington's really good.
And by the way, that game's this weekend.
Yeah, it's a tremendous game. So that's going to be a lot of fun, but I'll go with the winner of that game getting in because I think they wind up being better than USC. I think both of them are better than USC right now. And so I'll go with that, even though, like you said, they still got road games against Oregon State or one or maybe both of those teams do. So, yeah, I'll go Georgia, Michigan, winner of Oregon, Washington. And then, man, it's either Florida State or it's the Big 12 winner. And at this point, I guess I kind of do have to go with Florida State because I think I would need to see how the rest of things play out in the Big 12. So maybe to be different from Blaine, I'll pick Oregon instead of Washington, but it's not going to be easy. So
okay, I'm going to give you two more we haven't talked about because we really haven't hit the ACC outside of Florida. Clemson out of it at this point with 2 losses. North Carolina, games remaining, home with Miami, Virginia, Duke. and Campbell. Road trips at Georgia Tech, at Clemson, at NC State. North Carolina unbeaten. Scott Drake May, 7% chance according to FPI.
Yeah, I'm not there. Maybe they get there, but
I'm not sure they're good enough either. But again, what if you get through that unbeaten?
Well, sure, at that point, then of course. But I don't know if I'm quite there yet. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. I just look at this, like, I look at their schedule so far, and I don't know what I've learned necessarily. I mean, they're 5-0, but
here's another 5-0 ACC, and you tell me where the I guess 6-0 actually. Sorry, you tell me where the loss comes from. Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Kentucky at home. I mean, it could lose to Kentucky, could lose to Duke, but I would think Louisville will be slight favorites in both those. Fair?
Yeah.
Road trips to Pitt and Miami. Miami's November 18th. God only knows what that's going to look like at that point, given the debacle that Mario Cristobal had last weekend and the fact that that roster was built a lot on luring others through NIL. Those are the kinds of teams that sort of fall apart when you're missing expectations and you got a payroll. So, I mean, Louisville could run the table too, as someone mentioned.
Yeah, they absolutely could. So that's why I think I'm not as confident on Florida State, because I think the entire ACC to me is intriguing here. Although I don't know, again, it's a lot still to be determined there. So I would feel more confident in that Georgia, Michigan, or Georgia pick Big Ten team. Pick Oregon, Washington to me, and then either it's an Oklahoma running the table, or it's Florida State, or it's one of these wild card ACC teams that runs the table. So yeah, it's going to be a lot easier to do in the expanded playoff. I think we would not have as hard of a time on this. All right, Chris,
computers don't see Florida State as good as these SEC and Pac-12 and Big Ten teams we've discussed. I mean, every one of the computers that I look at, and there's 5 of them, has got Florida State between 10 and 15.
Yeah, we'll find out. All right, let's get to a couple of things real quick. We're going to kibosh this college football playoff odds discussion, and we got to get to bowl projections, and then we got to wrap up here in just a bit. But let's go to Oreo Puppy Dog real quick. If Tennessee wins out, can they make the college football playoff?
Well, yeah, because if Tennessee wins out, it's got wins at Alabama, over Georgia, wins at Missouri, wins at Kentucky, home win over A&M. Yeah,
I think they're in at that point. And I mean, look, if they're winning out, they're winning the SEC championship too, right? So
yeah,
they're in at that point.
So, now here's one for you. What if Tennessee wins out to the title game and then picks up a second loss there? I think they're out, but that is a darn good resume of wins. I mean, who in the country will have Georgia and Alabama to match? I know, I'm just playing along because that's fun.
But who would also have a blowout road loss at Florida of that group? You can talk all you want about wins, but who else of the group that they're going to be?
Your pesky facts ruining my fun over here, Blake. I'm trying to have fun, and you're squashing all of it.
So I'm just pointing out.
Chaos is fun, man.
Yeah, they got to win out the rest of the way, including SEC championship, because I think the teams they would be in the mix with would not have that loss at Florida. Which again, who knows? Maybe Florida wins out from here. If that happens, boy, Georgia fans not going to be happy. Losses to Tennessee and Florida. What do you think the chance of that is this year? Georgia losing to both Tennessee and Florida. Would you put that as a 0.1%, or would you put that as a? Blaine will give us a number in the comments. I got a pretty low number on that. Anyways,
that is a less than 5% chance. I think
5%. I'm going.
I said
much
less
lower than that. I know. I'm going much lower than 5%. Kirby asked the question: if Ole Miss or Tennessee have a chance to beat Georgia after what we saw Georgia do to Kentucky. Well, if we're just going off of what we saw Georgia do to Kentucky, I would say no. I just don't think
if Georgia that showed up against Kentucky shows up, you can forget any of these what ifs with Georgia because they'll be there.
Yeah, I think so too. So, but hard to put those.
But that's only
together.
happened once this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's hard to put that together week after week after week. I know, Andrew. I'm sorry. I said blowout. You're right. It's a 13-point loss, but in my mind, it felt like a blowout. Like it just felt like one of those because of
Florida controlled the game from the jump.
That's what I meant. I apologize, Andrew. I apologize. I know they didn't get completely blown out. They lost by 13, but I apologize to the Tennessee fans for this comment. I retract that statement. This is why I hate doing live shows. All right. What are we doing now? How about a quick word from the sponsor, Chris? Quick word.
How about a quick word? And we got to
get some bowl projections and get out of here.
I will filibuster to give you time to pull up the bowl projections. All right. Are you hungry? I'm hungry. Unfortunately, I'm out of CHOMPS because if I weren't out of CHOMPS, I would have one right here with me. It is the perfect go-to snack when you are podcasting, watching a game, whatever. Where you want to start with CHOMPS is the trial pack. They've got 6 different flavors. They are all great, and they are packed with protein, 9 to 10 grams per stick, 60 to 100 calories per stick, free of the top 9 allergens, no hidden harmful ingredients. So great for your kids. Get your protein pick-me-up. Eat something that's healthy for you and healthy for your kids. You can see the promo code on our banner. I think it's SE14. Get 15% off your order at CHOMPS. All right. If you are sick of working for someone else, looking for a better life so you can live more of your life on your terms, here's the place you need to go. MyPerfectFranchise.net. Talk to Andy Ludicky. He is the perfect guy to help you find your perfect franchise based on your goals and dreams, your skills, and your financial requirements. In other words, your personalized American dream. He'll educate you on the process, work with you every step of the way. No obligation. His services are free. Call him 404-973-9901. Fill out a free questionnaire to get started. Andy is in the business of helping people make their lives better. Not in this to steer you one place or another. He's a good man with conscience, and he's helped dozens of people find a better life with the right franchise. So go to myperfectfranchise.net and let Andy help you sort through that all. Okay, Blake, what have you got next?
Well, before we get to it, Blaine would like to note that Tennessee got ran through like a car wash on a long summer weekend that is hosting a college women's tennis team fundraiser at Florida. That's the phrasing we're using here. So my blowout comment was not great, but Blaine's comment.
I'm having a hard time. That's a little too much. It needs to be punchier than that.
All right, quickly. Chris, we got to get to these bowl projections. Sims asks, if Ole Miss wins out but Bama wins the West, would Ole Miss get to the playoff? I can answer that.
Okay, let's see what that would entail.
I don't think so.
Okay, you've got wins banked so far. Ole Miss, Tulane, Arkansas, Georgia Tech. LSU is a good win. The others are kind of nice wins, but nothing that probably changes minds when you're debating the elite teams. That would include wins over Texas A&M and Georgia. The one at Georgia would be one that gets attention, a win at Auburn, win at Mississippi State for whatever that's worth. I think it's tough, but let's say Georgia runs the table and Ole Miss is the only team to win. I mean, that's your shot, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it becomes a jumbled mess at that point, and I think there's a lot of, like I said, I think that's where the Big Ten is probably would salivate over that idea because I think they would get 2 teams in at that point.
Man, I wish we had 14 right now. That would be so much fun.
This would be one of those years, because I think like I said, there is 3 elite teams in the Big Ten. I mean, there are at least 2 of those teams, I think, in the Pac-12. Like we said, Florida State's leading the way in the ACC, but North Carolina's there, Louisville. Man, it would be quite interesting, I think, this season. So, and like we mentioned, you've got what I think is a good, offensively good LSU team that already has 2 losses, and so even they'd be interesting, I think, at this point. But we'll see what happens.
I think right now you've got 13 teams that you can kind of make an argument for. And then you get to Tennessee, Ole Miss. Like if you squint, some crazy stuff happens, then you're there. I mean, and here's another one: Oregon State. Same thing, just in the Pac-12. As tough as that league is, let's say Oregon State runs the table from here on out. They're kind of in that conversation too. But what I like is if we, if you go down and put Duke in there under a crazy scenario, you've got like 20 teams at some point. You could say, okay, if this, if that, then they're in the playoff, and certainly they're in a 14-team playoff.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Bowl projections. We're going to go back to Brett McMurphy's here on the Action Network. Always like those because they're interesting and they add in spreads and such. So that always, I think, is fun to look at from a spread standpoint. But all right, so not a lot has changed here at the top. I think last week or week before we went through these. Georgia, Florida State, still has his national championship game, so he's feeling good about that. In his 4, this was all the transition to this. He's got Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, Oregon, which might be my 4 I would pick perhaps at the moment. With Georgia playing Oregon, Michigan playing Florida State. SEC beyond that. I was about to say Texas because I'm already in the mindset that Texas is in the SEC. He's got Texas and Ohio State in the Peach Bowl. In the Cotton Bowl, Alabama and Oklahoma. So again, that would be the scenario. Alabama not in the playoff. The Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, our favorite here at Southeastern 14. Cheez-It, if you'd like to sponsor us, or anyone with a citrus flavor in their product, you can also sponsor us. caroline.smith at southeastern14.com. Ole Miss, the Rebels, playing the Wisconsin Badgers in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. The ReliaQuest Bowl, it's the first thing I always think of when I think of football games. ReliaQuest. Texas A&M against Notre Dame in that one. Music City Bowl. Oh, this is perfect for Chris. Thank goodness this team is coming to the Music City Bowl as much as he's been talking about them. Florida and Maryland. So Chris will get the Terrapins here in Nashville. Thank goodness. Finally, he gets to die. I'm just kidding. But Florida, Maryland in the Music City Bowl. The Liberty Bowl, South Carolina and Kansas State. Boy, that seems like I don't know. It's not one I would expect necessarily in the Liberty Bowl.
Can South Carolina get to 6 at this point?
Oh, boy. What's the remaining schedule? Let's make a quick pit stop here.
Let's see. They've only got 2 wins so far. Tell me what they've got left.
All right. So South Carolina has 2 wins at this point. They are 2-3. They play Florida this weekend. Winnable game. At Missouri, winnable, but going to be the underdog. At Texas A&M, going to be the underdog. Home against Jacksonville State, should be a win. Home against Vanderbilt, there's a win. So at Kentucky, home against Clemson. I mean, look, it's this Florida game this weekend is like, this is it. Like, they got to win this game, I think, based on their remaining schedule. And then they, of course, I think they get the Florida game, get the Vanderbilt game, get the Jacksonville State game. That gets them to 5. Then you got to find a way to win out of Missouri and A&M, beat a Kentucky or beat Clemson, which I think they can get one of those 4.
Well, they got Clemson at home this year, and Clemson is, they won that game last year at Clemson. Yeah. So I mean, it's possible. I mean, and look, don't count out Shane Beamer in November and late October.
I mean, they could win out here. I mean, look, they could win out. Who knows with South Carolina? So. All right, the Gator Bowl, the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, Tennessee and Duke. Still going here. Kentucky and Oklahoma State, and the Tax Act Texas Bowl in the TATB, as I like to call it, the Tax Act Texas Bowl. Kentucky and Oklahoma State.
That would be interesting.
Oh, it's got actually that one's got Kentucky in that matchup favored by 12.5 points. Holy cow! I think that's a lot of points.
The computers have not liked Oklahoma State this year. Now they got
that's why
they beat somebody this week in a consequence, didn't they? Who was it? I don't remember.
No, who did they play? Kansas State. They beat Kansas State.
They did. Yeah.
There you go. That's it. In the Duke's Mayo Bowl, our favorite as well, LSU and Miami. So, that'd be an interesting one. All right,
Duke's Mayo Bowl, you'd be really that LSU drops that far.
Boy, I mean that's where. Listen, it's just a projection. It's just Brett McMurphy's projection.
I know, but I mean, I don't know.
Well, look, if you're projecting that LSU is going to at least lose one more game, and that would be the Alabama game. I don't know. It's not out of
get you to at least the Gator Bowl or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's probably low, but
that seems a little light.
But speaking of teams that want to throw mayonnaise at their head coach. Boy, Miami fans could have a field day with that one in Charlotte.
LSU would kill
After
them.
this past week. Yeah, it's got, as of right here on the Action Network, has LSU favored by 5.5. You say that LSU's defense, man. I don't know. So I don't know.
Just
all right,
get
I'm
the
going
50 and
down.
you'll be okay.
Birmingham Bowl, Missouri and Arizona. That'd actually be a pretty fun game.
Missouri deserves better than that. Come on.
Yeah, but that'd be a fun game. It's a fun
Birmingham.
matchup. Chris knocking Birmingham around
Have you
here.
ever been to that game? I've been to that game. Now it's been a
Well,
been
yeah,
a
you
minute.
covered,
might
what
be
was it,
nice.
Vanderbilt and Houston or Temple or somebody?
That
What was
freaking
that?
barbed wire on the fences outside. I was with a buddy of mine. He says, is that to keep people in or keep them out? I mean,
Well, come on, Chris. Professional wrestling, long history of barbed wire. It's not a big deal. So, I mean, football, professional wrestling, they're both very
barbed
similar.
wire bowl. Missouri's not going to the barbed wire bowl. Come on.
They will be in the barbed wire bowl against Jaden Delore and the Arizona Wildcats.
That would be fun.
A battle of the Big 12 teams, Missouri and Arizona. It's just wild to think about. The Gasparilla Bowl, presented by Union Home Mortgage. Auburn and South Florida. So it's got Auburn favored by 17.5 in that theoretical matchup. So that's worth noting there. And
Auburn needs to be Birmingham. Sorry, Auburn, but
I think that's it. So the only teams left out, again, just like they were a week ago, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Arkansas.
What's a Gasparilla?
You know,
like a pirate or something?
Gasparilla sounds like a mix between a dinosaur and a lizard, in my opinion. So you guys can weigh in the comments. But so there you go. That's Brett McMurphy's updated bowl projections. Again, we picked these because I like seeing the potential spreads on games. And listen, I'm a proud paying member to the Action Network. They do a great job over there. So there are your updated bowl projections for week 7.
The Gasparilla's a lawnmower?
Yeah, it is a lawnmower.
But like it's named after something, right? I'm like, I could have sworn I looked this up before.
Technically, dinosaurs and lizards mow lawns. I mean, technically. So the mix between the two, I could see.
They grow lawns now, but
see that being the case. All right, guys, 5-minute warning. We're going to wrap up here soon. If you want to get any super chats in, you can do that. We appreciate everybody jumping in as always. Our man Blaine here, Andrew, Chris, the regulars always jumping here with us, Oreo Puppy Dog, and so forth. So we appreciate you guys hopping in every day, 11 a.m. here on SEC Daily. And a lot more fun stuff to come on the channel. Of course, remember, all of our previews are already up for the week 7 games. They're already up on the channel, so check those out. Picks and everything for those. So we appreciate you guys.
And we'll be back at it, by the way, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That may be a little bit of a deviation from how we do it this week. We've got fall break here in the Lee household, and God knows I could use a day or two of vacation, so we may pre-record some stuff and then just run them.
Yeah, just so you
at
guys
11
know.
As if they're live, but they probably won't be.
They will probably be premieres instead of live, meaning, you will see the video that was already recorded. We'll premiere it at 11, but we will not be live probably the next 3 days. So just a note on that, but we will have guests and so forth, interviews looking at some of these games. So, yep. So,
and I think I might have a first-time guest. I haven't lined it up yet officially, but
The Rock. I rumor has it it's The Rock. That's what I hear. I hear that
it'll be almost that much fun.
Will be on. So you guys can, spoil that on Twitter if you want, but that's what I'm hearing. Sources say that, The Rock's coming on. I don't know. Maybe a different Rock than I'm thinking of, but that's just what I'm hearing. So
me, my extensive knowledge of wrestling.
Yeah. But Blaine can confirm in the comments, but someone named The Rock. I don't know. We'll see. But anyways, all right, Chris, that's all I got. We appreciate you guys. We worked through a lot of scenarios today. So let's watch about 3 upsets this weekend that turn everything upside down. We have the same conversation next week, and it's completely different. So,
and hopefully my voice is in better shape tomorrow. I got a little excited watching the Braves last night.
Well, they sure made it exciting.
You turned it off. You doubted.
I did turn it off. I went to watch professional football in the Las Vegas Raiders and Green Bay Packers. So there you go. All right.
The Rock is right about that. goodness, that is malpractice. All right. Yeah, I think we're done today. Thanks for watching. Tell a friend, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Those things all help us out. For Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. Appreciate you watching us here on the SEC Daily at Southeastern 14. We'll see you again on Wednesday.